mathematically. Events are either net positive, net negative, or rarely neutral. Still, I'm almost obsessed with finding some good in everything that happens to me. I don't think everything happens for a reason, but I do think we can give everything a reason, or at least most events, and carve out a takeaway anyway. This is not from a desire to be stunningly optimistic. I really don't think that I am, nor that it is necessarily realistic to be, but more a reluctance to let anything that has taken up time, energy, money, or hope go to waste. I think what we expend these things on, anything we consume, and how we consume it shapes us. Here I'm referring to consumption as everything we experience, see, do, and feel. Essentially, inputs into your life. From a deterministic standpoint, everything we consume defines us by programming who we are and the decisions we'll make in the future, the outputs. By adopting a mindset wherein I tell myself I somehow gain something from every single thing that happens to me, whether that's a cliche lesson or artistic inspiration, or even just the desire to make something better, I'm constantly feeling productive towards growing as a person, no matter what I do. To me, it's important to find a way to take these net negative situations especially, and not think obsessively about how to magic them into being positive. In the case of trauma or illness or grief, I don't think this is possible or even healthy, but still not have it be a completely wasted, maybe bottomless pit of energy. The most effective way, if you ask me, is to express the difficulty, specifically to express it through creation. For example, Mexican painter Frida Kahlo suffered a lot in her life. At the age of 18, she was in a bus accident, which resulted in 35 operations over the course of her life, infertility, chronic pain, and feelings of intense isolation and existentialism. She expressed this pain through her artwork, using cultural symbols as icons of trauma and misfortune. And this is just one historical artistic example of expression of suffering becoming a symbol of strength. Moving to the more personal, when I was 16, I was in a road accident wherein I broke 5 bones, had a bad head injury, and also punctured a lung, among other smaller injuries. After a long time on medication and physical therapy, I'm very fortunate to say I've almost fully recovered apart from chronic pain. Again, I am privileged enough to say that this pain is reducing and is completely fixable. But the recovery process, in addition to other people's response to it, was really not always easy. As a woman of color, I've experienced sexism growing up. I've experienced and witnessed racism while living in Europe. But I'd never encountered ableism before, or to be very honest, had it on my radar at all. Trying to cope with the challenges of the International Baccalaureate Diploma program while also navigating the onset of chronic pain was really difficult, as was dealing with the fact that the way many students and educators think about the education system is founded on a system that is built only with the very healthy and able-bodied in mind. From ignorant comments to ableist policies to losing friends, I realized no one was talking about ableism, and I had no way or space to express how I was feeling. I fell into a state of self-pity, which completely antagonized accountability in both academic and social settings. Being mathematically minded, I used a formula that worked wonders to drive me out of the victim mindset. Event plus reaction equals outcome. And my reaction was creativity. I've been drawing since the age of 3, and inspired by Frida Kahlo, I channeled medical themes and my feelings towards the transition between perfect health, hospitalization, chronic pain, and now slowly back to perfect health into my artwork. Here are some of my artworks following the accident. This pair of watercolor depictions of medical equipment filled with boba tea and coffee are an expression of the juxtaposition between going from being a perfectly healthy teenager to one dealing with hospitalization within the span of a day, an hour even. These pieces, titled Needs and Wants and Morning Dose, are an exploration of how my view of the world has changed through my recovery. Another piece I did is one I made as a tribute to Frida Kahlo, inspired by her piece Self-Portrait with Thorn Necklace and Hummingbird. It's called Self-Portrait with Lotus and Cow, and it has a similar composition to our own painting, except this one is of an Indian woman. Kahlo's work is largely influenced by her Mexican culture, and she uses cultural symbols like animals to express her suffering due to trauma. Here I gave eyes as like a traffic light to a black cat, which is a European symbol of bad luck, because the origin of my medical trauma is in fact European. The other animals and objects depicted are influenced by my Indian Hindu identity and represent healing and recovery. The cow represents sacred life that deserves protection. The lotus represents karma. The snakes are symbolic of mortality and rebirth, which I associate with recovery and new beginnings for me as I healed. In India, chili and lemon charms are hung from doorways as protection from evil spirits. And Hindu mothers draw black dots onto their babies' faces with kajal, which is kind of like eyeliner, or kohl. And here, the idea behind it is to ward off nazar, which is the evil eye. I painted one on my cheek to refer to rebirth and looking at the world almost through the eyes of a newborn because of how much the experience changed me. However, when I talk about giving an event a reason for happening or forcing it into not being a waste of energy, I don't refer to creativity, or I don't mean to refer to creativity as only someone who can write a novel full of beautiful prose or paint Van Gogh's Starry Night can do. With this particular event, another creative response I had was programming, writing and creating tools that amplify voices with code. I recognize my incredible privilege that although that thing happened to me, this was only my temporary reality, but I still wanted to spread awareness about ableism on a larger scale, and I wanted a voice to do that. I coded an AI and webpage dedicated to creating conversation about anti-ableism and accessibility globally, though primarily in India, where there's a very prominent idea that disability is karmic punishment, which means that it's punishment for things that a disabled person did in a past life, or their parents did in their current life. The platform, which is called Zoe's Inclusive AI, ZI for short, is offered in 8 Indian languages from around the country, and also English. ZI is an AI bot designed to help users apply for accessible jobs, educators create inclusive institutions, users learn about laws that protect disabled citizens in their home country, and work on themselves to be better allies. The AI is also accompanied by an information page where you can interactively work on making inclusive anti-ableist language a habit. So not using ableist slurs and not using words like crazy or mad to describe something that is unbelievable. Read about supporting disabled loved ones, see data on ableism, and much more. Primarily, the platform aims to create empathy, awareness, and understanding. Today, ZI has over 115,000 unique users and has been used almost 160,000 times, largely in workshops in parts of rural India in partnership with nonprofits. I also interviewed leaders like IBM's accessibility lead, Dr. Sherry Trevin, and Stanford professors Cynthia Lee and Alexander Nemerov to discuss making our technologies less ableist and the journey towards that. This winter, I also wrote a research paper that got published at the International Journal of Engineering Development and Research about views on disability in India and a study that I did about whether my projects can increase empathy levels and encourage donations to anti-ableist nonprofits. The result was that yes, it largely did. ZI was featured by Indian daily newspapers and magazines, as well as Vogue, where I was named one of the top 13 change makers to know in 2021. It was also featured in The Logical Indian, which is a very popular Indian news source. All of these things really helped with the goal of starting a conversation. I also coded a platform called the Empathy Project, which is a game where users live a day in the life of a student with chronic pain, chronic fatigue, and PTSD, having to make the difficult choices that they face throughout the day and see live scores of how their avatar's mental and physical health improve or fall apart with the choices they make, as well as see the consequences of that. It's important also to state that this response to an awful event doesn't make it all better, nor is it realistic to expect it to. Kahlo's self-portrait without hope didn't magically lift her off the bed of chronic pain and suffering or make her with hope. But there can be catharsis in storytelling and hoping to connect with people through what you might be going through, whether that's something as heavy on the self as grief and pain and injury, or even something as light as frustration over a bad day. For example, my parents and I once spent a whole day trying to get an Italian study visa, a day that was filled with flooding, our car breaking down, lots of paperwork, and both of them having to take a day off, as well as really, really heavy rain. We took multiple trips across Bombay, only to find out that all our work over the whole day was completely wasted because an older visa was still valid. Now this is lighthearted, but for me, telling a story of a minor inconvenience can give purpose to a frustrating but lighthearted waste like that one. In the other case, which is a lot more heavy, sharing long-term pain can be cathartic in response to a feeling of loneliness through pain. Just yesterday I got a comment about how I seem to be completely over my medical trauma and I can talk about it so easily, which, while maybe not completely true, is largely because I made peace with instability in my life through creative response. One person's art may also help others dealing with similar pain by making them feel less alone. For example, for me, writing essays for my visual arts class about Frida Kahlo, for example, was incredibly inspiring and led to me channeling medical themes into my art journey, which made it a lot more personal while allowing me to come to terms with trauma. Essentially, channeling that experience into creation can help provide purpose and really, really provide fulfillment. I apologize for the cliche, but it is true that life gave me lemons. And it took education, patience, and a lot of tiger balm, but I continue to work on making lemonade. Thank you.